I should have known something was wrong when my mother didn't even look at me during my graduation ceremony. She was too busy fussing over my half-sister Sadie's hair, making sure every strand was perfect for the photos she wasn't even supposed to be in. This was my day, at least it was supposed to be. My name is Tessa and I graduated high school yesterday. Today I'm sitting in the campus library, staring at an email that's making my blood run cold. Dear Miss Whitmore, we confirm receipt of your withdrawal from fall admission. I read the words again and again, my hands shaking. I never sent a withdrawal letter to Stanford. This was my dream, the escape plan I'd been working toward for the past 4 years. Something wasn't adding up. There you are. Sadie's voice cut through my thoughts. She was leaning against the doorframe, twirling her perfectly styled hair. Mom's looking everywhere for you. We're about to head to Rosetta's for my early graduation celebration lunch. My graduation was yesterday, I said, my voice flat. Yours isn't for another year. Sadie shrugged, examining her manicured nails. Dad says it's never too early to celebrate success. Besides, I already got accepted to Yale. Early admission. She paused, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh wait, weren't you supposed to hear back from Stanford by now? The way she said it, something in her tone made my stomach drop. I glanced back at the email, then at her phone clutched in her hand. Suddenly, the pieces started falling into place. You did this, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. You hacked my email and withdrew my application. Sadie's expression didn't change, but her eyes glittered. Prove it. Before I could respond, my mother's voice echoed through the library. Girls, what's taking so long? Grant's waiting in the car. I watched as Sadie transformed, her face softening into the perfect daughter mask she wore so well. Coming, Mom. I found her. My mother appeared behind Sadie, looking immaculate as always in her designer dress. Tessa, why are you still in here? Everyone's waiting. And please tell me you're not wearing those ratty jeans to lunch. I looked down at my favorite pair of worn jeans, suddenly feeling shabby and small. I'm not feeling well, I lied. I think I'll skip lunch. Don't be ridiculous, my mother said, but her attention was already back on Sadie, adjusting her daughter's collar. This is a family celebration. For what? The words burst out before I could stop them. My graduation was yesterday, and none of you even stayed for the whole ceremony. Oh, honey, my mother sighed, that familiar look of disappointment crossing her face. We had to leave early for Sadie's Yale interview prep. You know how important that was. Besides, you're just going to beauty school now, right? I froze. I hadn't told anyone about applying to beauty school. It was my backup plan, something I'd only researched in secret. Sadie's smirk told me everything I needed to know. She'd been monitoring my emails for longer than I'd realized. Actually, I said, standing up and gathering my things, I'm not feeling well at all. I think I need to go lie down. Suit yourself, my mother said, already turning away. Come on, Sadie, darling. We don't want to keep your father waiting. I watched them leave, Sadie throwing one last triumphant glance over her shoulder. As their footsteps faded, I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person who had always been in my corner. Grandma Ruth? It's Tessa. I need your help. My voice cracked slightly. Something's happened and I don't know what to do. Come over, sweetheart, my grandmother's warm voice replied. And bring those college emails with you. We'll figure this out together. As I gathered my things to leave, I caught sight of my reflection in the library window. For the first time in years, I didn't see the shadow of my perfect half-sister or my mother's disappointment. I saw someone who was done being pushed around. Sadie might think she'd won, but she had no idea what she'd just started. Grandma Ruth's kitchen always smelled like vanilla and hope. As I sat at her worn oak table, clutching a mug of tea, I could almost pretend everything was normal. But the Stanford withdrawal email glaring from my phone screen said otherwise. That girl has gone too far this time, Ruth said, her usually gentle voice sharp with anger. She was already dialing her phone. I'm calling Marla. Your aunt needs to know about this. I reached across the table and caught her wrist. Please don't. Not yet. The last thing I needed was another family drama. I need to handle this myself. Ruth set the phone down but fixed me with that knowing look she'd perfected over 70 years. And how exactly do you plan to do that, sweetheart? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Mom's name flashed across the screen, followed by a string of messages. Where are you? Grant is furious you missed lunch. Come home now. I switched the phone off and pushed it away. I can't go back there tonight. Of course you can't, Ruth said, already heading to the spare bedroom. You'll stay here. But tomorrow you need a plan. She was right. I needed more than just a plan. I needed leverage. Sadie had been playing this game longer than me, and she'd gotten sloppy. There had to be evidence of what she'd done. The next morning, I walked into our kitchen to find Grant and Mom having one of their quiet conversations that always seemed to be about me. They fell silent when I entered. "Nice of you to finally join us," Grant said, not looking up from his tablet. "Your mother tells me you've been making some interesting career choices." I grabbed an apple from the counter, trying to keep my voice steady. "I haven't made any choices yet." "Beauty school," he scoffed. "That's hardly a career. Besides, we've already discussed your role in the family business." No, they'd discussed it. I'd just been told. "Actually," I said, "I wanted to talk about my Stanford application." The kitchen went quiet. Too quiet. Mom's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "Oh, that reminds me." Sadie breezed in, perfectly timed as always. "Dad, remember that investment opportunity one told you about? The one through Chad's father's firm?" Grant's face lit up, the way it never did for me. "The tech startup? Have they opened up spots for early investors?" "They have," Sadie smiled, shooting me a quick glance. "But we should discuss it privately. You know how these things are." I watched as she led Grant away, effectively shutting down any conversation about Stanford. But not before I caught a glimpse of something on her phone screen. An email draft with a familiar header. "Tessa," Mom said, finally acknowledging me. "About yesterday." "Save it," I cut her off. "I need to get ready for work." "Work?" She blinked. "What work?" "My shift at Mel's Diner starts in an hour." I hadn't planned to tell her, but suddenly I wanted her to know. "I've been working there for 3 weeks. Her face crumpled into that familiar look of disappointment. "A diner? What will people think? They might think I'm responsible. Independent." I met her eyes. "Like Sadie." Mom's expression hardened. "Don't start with that jealousy again. Your sister, half-sister, works hard for everything she gets. Maybe if you showed half her initiative." I laughed, and the sound surprised us both. "You have no idea what Sadie's capable of, do you?" "What's that supposed to mean?" But I was already heading upstairs. I had a shift to get to, and more importantly, I had a plan forming. Sadie wasn't the only one who could access emails, and I had a feeling that draft I'd glimpsed on her phone would be very interesting to Grant if he knew what his perfect daughter was really planning with Chad's father's firm. As I changed into my diner uniform, I heard Sadie's laughter floating up from Grant's study. She thought she had everyone fooled. But she'd forgotten one thing. I'd been watching her tricks for years. And now it was my turn to play. The thing about working at a diner is you hear everything. People forget you're there, like you're just part of the furniture. That's how I overheard Chad Miller bragging to his friends about the foolproof investment scheme he and Sadie were planning. I was wiping down their table when Chad's words made me freeze. "Grant Alden won't know what hit him," Chad laughed, not noticing me. "Sadie's got him wrapped around her finger. One signature from Daddy Dearest, and we're set." My hand tightened around the rag. Before I could hear more, Mel called me from the kitchen. "Tessa, your grandmother's on the phone. Says it's urgent. Ruth never called me at work. Something was wrong." "Sweetheart," her voice was tight with worry. "Sadie's here. She's telling your mother some pretty serious stories about you." My stomach dropped. "What kind of stories?" "She's saying you've been stealing from Grant's office. That you're trying to sabotage her Yale acceptance." "Tessa, she has screenshots." "Of course she did. Sadie never made a move without backup." "I'll be right there," I said, already untying my apron. When I pulled up to our house, Aunt Marla's car was in the driveway. Great. Sadie had called in the whole cavalry. Inside, they were waiting in the living room like some kind of intervention. Mom was crying, actually crying, while Sadie sat beside her, the perfect picture of concern. Grant stood by the fireplace, his face stormy. Aunt Marla looked uncertain, glancing between everyone. "Show her," Sadie said softly, handing her phone to Grant. He thrust it at me. On the screen was an email draft, one I'd supposedly written, detailing plans to hack into his company's accounts. It was dated the same day as my Stanford withdrawal. "I didn't write that," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. "It's from your email account," Grant said. "Just like the Stanford withdrawal." Which I also didn't write. I looked at Mom, pleading. "You have to believe me. Sadie's setting me up." "Oh, here we go again," Sadie sighed. "Always blaming me for your mistakes." "Mistakes?" I laughed, the sound harsh and unfamiliar. "Like how you and Chad are planning to scam Grant out of his investment money?" The room went silent. Sadie's face flickered for just a moment before she recovered. "What is she talking about?" Grant demanded. "She's lying," Sadie said quickly. She's just jealous because Chad asked me to prom instead of her. I heard him at the diner, I pressed on. Ask him about the foolproof investment scheme you two cooked up. Enough. Mom stood up, mascara streaking her cheeks. Tessa, how dare you make up such horrible lies about your sister? Half-sister, I corrected automatically. See? Sadie's eyes welled with perfect tears. She's always trying to divide our family. First the stealing, now these accusations. Aunt Marla finally spoke up. Maybe we should all take a breath. No, Grant cut her off. I want to know what's really going on. Tessa, if you can't prove these accusations, check his investment portfolio, I said. Look for any new tech startups linked to Richard Miller's firm. Grant's face changed. He pulled out his phone, fingers moving rapidly. Sadie stood up suddenly. Daddy, you don't have to. Sit down, he snapped, and for the first time, I saw real fear in Sadie's eyes. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You'll regret this. I looked up to find Sadie staring at me, her mask finally cracking. Behind the perfect makeup and practiced tears, I saw something ugly and desperate. I have to go, I said, backing toward the door. My shift isn't over. Tessa, wait. Aunt Marla called, but I was already gone. In my car, my hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. I'd finally pushed back, but this wasn't over. Sadie wouldn't let it be. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Ruth. Come stay with me tonight. We need to talk about your beauty school application. I think I can help. I started the car, watching Sadie's silhouette in the living room window. She might have the family fooled, but she'd forgotten something important about me. I had nothing left to lose. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I found myself standing in Ruth's bathroom, surrounded by mannequin heads with half-finished hairstyles. My hands were cramping from hours of practice, but I couldn't stop. Not when I was finally getting somewhere. You're getting better, Ruth said from the doorway, watching me work. That French braid actually looks French this time. Before I could respond, my phone lit up with Grant's name. I'd been dodging his calls since the investment scheme revelation, but this time something made me answer. Where are the files? His voice was ice cold. What files? Don't play dumb, Tessa. The backup drives from my home office are missing. Sadie says she saw you in there last night. I gripped the edge of the sink. I haven't been home in 3 weeks. You know that. Then explain why your fingerprints are all over my desk. My old house key. The one I'd forgotten to return. Sadie must have. Check your security cameras, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Conveniently disabled last night. Along with Sadie's phone tracking app. Of course they were. I could almost admire how thorough she was being. Grant, think about it. Why would I? Because you're desperate, he cut in. Working at that diner, living with your grandmother. You're not exactly making good life choices. The mannequin head toppled as I spun around, nearly knocking over my carefully organized styling tools. At least I'm not the one being scammed by my own daughter. We've investigated Chad's investment proposal. Everything checks out. You're just trying to cause trouble, like always. I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. Have you actually met Richard Miller? Chad's father? Or just seen the paperwork Sadie showed you? The silence on the other end told me everything. You have until tomorrow to return the files, he said finally. Or I'm calling the police. The line went dead. I looked up to find Ruth watching me, her face tight with worry. I heard, she said quietly. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Sadie. Meet me at Riverside Park. 1 hour. Come alone or the drives go public. I have to go, I said, already grabbing my jacket. Ruth caught my arm. Tessa, wait. There's something you should know about the trust fund your father left you. What trust fund? The one Lila's been managing since he died. You're supposed to get access when you turn 21. The world tilted sideways. Mom told me there wasn't any money left. Ruth's expression hardened. There's plenty left. Nearly $500,000. I've been trying to find the right time to tell you. My phone buzzed again. Sadie, tick-tock. I have to deal with this first, I said, heading for the door. But we're not done talking about the trust fund. Be careful, Ruth called after me. That girl fights dirty. She had no idea. At the park, Sadie was waiting by the river, looking perfectly put together as always. The missing drives sat on the bench beside her. You know, she said conversationally, I almost admire how hard you're trying. Beauty school, the diner job. It's pathetically ambitious. Where are the real drives, Sadie? She smiled. These are the real drives. But the files? Those were uploaded days ago. Insurance, you know? Against what? Against you ruining everything. Her smile vanished. Did you really think you could turn Dad against me? I'm his real daughter. You're stealing from him. I'm securing my future. Unlike you, I have plans bigger than cutting hair in some strip mall. Using Chad's fake investment scheme? Sadie's laugh was sharp. Chad, please. He's just the face of the operation. This was my idea. All of it, including your Stanford rejection. I stepped closer. Why? What did I ever do to you? You existed, she said simply. Always there, with your sad eyes and your dead dad's trust fund. Making Mom feel guilty. Making everything complicated. The truth hit me like a physical blow. You know about the trust fund? Of course I do. Mom's been investing it in Dad's company for years. My company soon. She stood, brushing off her designer jeans. So here's the deal, walk away. From the house, the family, all of it. Or these files show everyone exactly what kind of person you really are. I stared at my half-sister, finally seeing her clearly. You really think you've won, don't you? Her smile was almost pitying. Haven't I? But as I watched her walk away, I thought about Ruth's revelation about the trust fund, about everything I'd learned working at the diner. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about winning. It's about surviving long enough to tell the truth. The box arrived on Ruth's doorstep the morning after my confrontation with Sadie. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a complete professional hairstyling kit. Scissors that caught the light like diamonds. Brushes with perfect bristles. Everything I'd been saving for but couldn't yet afford. Open it, Ruth urged, holding out an envelope. Read the note first. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. For when you're ready to build your own future. Love, Aunt Marla. Before I could process this, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. We need to talk about the trust fund. Come home. Now. Ruth touched my shoulder. You don't have to go. But I did. Because for once, I had leverage. The house looked different somehow, smaller maybe. Mom was waiting in the kitchen. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the shadows under her eyes. Grant sat beside her, his laptop open to what looked like banking records. Where's Sadie? I asked. At Yale, Mom said quickly. Touring the campus. Really? Because I just saw her car at Chad Miller's house. Grant's head snapped up. What? Never mind that. Mom cut in. We need to discuss your father's trust fund. You mean the one you've been funneling into Grant's company? The words came out sharp, precise. The one you told me didn't exist? Mom's face went white. Who told you? Does it matter? I pulled out my phone, showing them the banking records Ruth had helped me find. What matters is it's illegal. And I have proof. Grant stood up so fast his chair toppled. Are these the files you stole? I didn't steal anything. But Sadie did. I met his eyes. Check your security footage again. The real footage, not whatever she showed you. Check the timestamps. This is ridiculous, Mom said, but her voice wavered. Sadie would never. Like she'd never hack my Stanford application? Or set up a fake investment scheme with Chad. Grant's face darkened. What investment scheme? Before I could answer, the front door slammed. Sadie stormed in, her Yale sweater wrinkled, mascara smeared. What did you do? She demanded, waving her phone. Chad just called. His father's backing out of the deal. The room went silent. Grant turned to her slowly. What deal, Sadie? She froze, realizing her mistake. For a moment, I saw panic flash across her face. Then her mask slipped back into place. Tessa's lying, she said smoothly. She's just jealous because... Stop. Grant's voice was quiet, dangerous. Show me your phone. Daddy. Now. As Sadie handed over her phone, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear in her eyes. I should go, I said, picking up my bag. But first. I turned to Mom. I want my trust fund transferred to my name. All of it. Or I go to the police with proof of embezzlement. You wouldn't, Mom whispered. Try me. I walked out, leaving chaos behind me. Through the window, I could hear Grant's voice rising, Sadie's protests, Mom's sobs. Back at Ruth's, I found her in the garden, tending her roses. She looked up as I approached. How did it go? I sat beside her, feeling the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. I think I just burned every bridge I had left. Sometimes, Ruth said, pruning a dead branch, bridges need to burn so you can build better ones. My phone buzzed again. A series of texts from Sadie. You're dead to this family. Hope you're happy now. You have no idea what you've started. I switched off my phone and picked up the hairstyling kit Aunt Marla had sent. The scissors felt right in my hand, like they'd been waiting for me. Want to be my first official client? I asked Ruth. She smiled, touching her silver hair. I thought you'd never ask. As I began setting up my supplies, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked different, stronger maybe, or just more certain. Sadie was right about one thing. She had no idea what she'd started. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's future. It's about finally building your own. The first rock crashed through Ruth's front window at midnight. The second one had a note attached. Leave town or worse. I knew who sent them without reading the signature. Ruth insisted on calling the police, but they just took notes and left, saying there wasn't enough evidence. Of course there wasn't. Sadie never left evidence. The next morning, I found Grant's prized Aston Martin parked in Ruth's driveway, its pristine silver paint now decorated with long, deliberate scratches. My house key was stuck in the driver's door. I didn't do this. I told the officers who showed up 20 minutes later. But Grant and Mom were already there, Sadie crying perfectly timed tears beside them. Security footage shows someone with your build, Grant said, his voice cold. Using your key. That's impossible. I was inside all night with. With me, Ruth interrupted, stepping forward. Tessa never left the house. The cameras don't lie, Sadie sniffled. Just like she didn't lie about destroying my Yale acceptance. I spun toward her. What? The admission office called this morning, Mom said, not meeting my eyes. Someone sent them evidence that Sadie cheated on her SATs. They've rescinded her acceptance. The pieces clicked together too late. I should have known Sadie wouldn't go down without taking everyone with her. Press charges, Sadie urged Grant, wiping away tears that looked almost real. She's obviously unstable. Grant pulled out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer. Wait, Ruth said. If you press charges, I'll have to tell them about the trust fund. About where that money really went. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Fine, Grant finally said. But I want her gone. Today. If I see her near our house or my car again, I'm calling the police. Our house. I laughed, the sound brittle. I grew up there. That was my father's. Your father is dead, Mom cut in. And you're no longer welcome in our home. The words hit harder than any rock through a window. Lila, Ruth gasped, but Mom was already turning away, leading Sadie to their car. Grant stayed behind. One more thing, he said, handing me an envelope. Cease and desist letter from my lawyers. Stay away from my family, my business, and especially my daughter. She's not your daughter, I shot back. She's a con artist who's bleeding you dry. The only person causing problems here is you. He glanced at Ruth's broken window. Clean up your act, Tessa. Before someone gets hurt. After they left, Ruth found me in the garden, staring at nothing. We'll fight this, she said. I have savings. We can get a lawyer. Don't. My voice sounded strange, distant. Sadie won't stop until she's destroyed everything. Then we'll start over. Together. But even as she said it, I saw Ruth press a hand to her chest, her breathing labored. The stress was getting to her. Her heart couldn't take much more. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Karma's a bitch. So am I. S. Below it was a link to a social media post going viral in our community. Pictures of Grant's car, security footage stills of someone who looked just like me, and a story about the unstable daughter who couldn't handle her sister's success. The comments were already rolling in. Always knew there was something off about her. Poor Sadie, having to deal with such a toxic sister. Lock her up before she really hurt someone. I deleted the app, but the damage was done. My reputation, my future, my family, Sadie had taken everything. I have to leave, I said quietly. Tessa, no. Look at your window, Ruth. Look at what she did to Grant's car. Next time it could be worse. It could be you. I'm not afraid of her. But I am. The admission hurt more than Mom's rejection. I'm afraid of what she'll do next. Of what I might do to stop her. Ruth took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Then we'll leave together. Start fresh somewhere else. I looked at my grandmother, my last real family, and made the hardest decision of my life. No, I said. I have to do this alone. Because sometimes protecting the people you love means letting them go. And sometimes revenge means walking away. At least, that's what I kept telling myself as I packed my bags, leaving everything I loved behind. 6 months after I left town, Aunt Marla's call brought me back. Ruth had died in her sleep, peaceful and quick, they said. I missed the funeral. Sadie's restraining order made sure of that. But today, standing in Ruth's lawyer's office, none of that mattered. She left you everything, the lawyer said, sliding the papers across his desk. The house, her savings, and this. He handed me an envelope, Ruth's familiar handwriting spelling out my name. Before I could open it, the door burst open. Sadie stormed in, followed by Mom and Grant. This is ridiculous, Sadie snapped. She's mentally unstable. There's no way Grandma Ruth meant to. She wasn't your grandmother, I said quietly, finding strength in the weight of Ruth's letter in my hands. Miss Alden, the lawyer interrupted. This meeting is private. Private? Grant stepped forward. After what she did to my car. To my company. I looked up sharply. What happened to your company? The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken accusations. Sadie's face had gone pale, her designer clothes suddenly looking cheaper, worn. The investment scheme, I realized. It wasn't just Chad's father, was it? How many fake investors did you create, Sadie? Shut up, she hissed. The SEC is investigating, Grant said, his voice hollow. We've lost everything. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. We had to sell the house. I opened Ruth's letter, needing her words more than ever. As I read, my hands began to shake. All these years, I whispered. She was gathering evidence. About the trust fund, about Sadie's schemes, everything. I looked at my half-sister. She knew what you were doing before any of us. Sadie lunged for the letter, but I was faster. You can't prove anything. Actually, the lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Whitmore left quite extensive documentation, including emails between Miss Alden and various fake investment accounts. You're lying, Sadie's voice cracked. Daddy, tell them. Enough. Grant's shout made us all jump. Haven't you done enough damage? Sadie's mask finally cracked. I did it for us. For our family. No, I said, standing up. You did it for yourself. Just like you sabotaged my Stanford application. Just like you framed me for vandalizing Grant's car. You have no idea what it's like, she spat. Being perfect all the time. Never making mistakes. While you got to be the tragic victim everyone felt sorry for. Sorry for? I laughed. You took everything from me. And now I have nothing. Tears streaked her makeup. So congratulations. You won. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and felt something unexpected. Pity. This wasn't about winning, I said, gathering Ruth's papers. It was about surviving you. What are you going to do? Mom asked, speaking for the first time. Press charges. I thought about Ruth, about revenge, about the cost of hatred. No, I said finally. I'm going to open a salon. In Ruth's house. I turned to Sadie. And you're going to stay away from me, or these documents go to the SEC. You can't. I can. And I will. I headed for the door, then paused. You know what the difference is between us, Sadie? I never needed to destroy you to prove my worth. Outside, the spring air felt clean new. Ruth's letter was warm in my pocket, filled with love and one final gift. The truth that would keep Sadie out of my life forever. My phone buzzed, a text from the beauty school I'd applied to. Application accepted. I smiled, thinking of Ruth's styling tools waiting at home. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's world. It's about building your own, stronger than before. Behind me, I could hear Sadie's sobs, Mom's attempts at comfort, Grant's heavy silence. But for the first time, their drama felt distant, unimportant. I had a salon to open, a life to build, and finally, the power to make it happen on my own terms. 1 year after Ruth's death, I stood in front of my salon mirror, watching the morning light stream through newly installed windows. The sign outside read Ruth's Grace, a tribute to the woman who made it all possible. The bell chimed. Through the reflection, I saw Mom standing in the doorway, looking smaller, somehow less certain. We're not open yet, I said, continuing to arrange my styling tools. I know. She clutched her purse like a shield. I saw the article about you in the local paper. Young entrepreneur transforms historic home into thriving business. I turned, really looking at her for the first time in months. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by department store basics. Sadie's downfall had affected them all. What do you want, Mom? Sadie's in therapy, she said abruptly. Grant's filed for divorce. Everything's. She trailed off. Falling apart? She nodded, tears threatening. I found this in our old house, while we were moving out. She held out a worn envelope. It's from your father. My hands shook as I took it. Inside was a faded photograph, me at 5, sitting in his salon chair, playing with his styling tools. On the back, he'd written, "My little artist following in my footsteps." I never told you, Mom said softly, but the salon was his dream too. Before the cancer. She stopped, composing herself. I was wrong, Tessa. About everything. The bell chimed again. Aunt Marla walked in, carrying a box of old styling magazines. She froze when she saw Mom. I should go, Mom said quickly. Stay. The word surprised us both. I could use help organizing the magazine collection. If you want. As they sorted through the boxes, I opened the final letter from Ruth, the one I'd found hidden in her styling kit. Dearest Tessa, by now you've probably figured out why I kept such detailed records of Sadie's schemes. But that wasn't my real gift to you. Your father left you more than just a trust fund. He left you his talent, his dream. I saw it every time you picked up those scissors. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting free. A text lit up my phone. Sadie, for the first time since the lawyer's office. I'm sorry, it read. Nothing more. I deleted it without responding. Some bridges stay burned. The morning sun caught the salon's new sign, casting warm shadows across the floor. Mom and Marla's quiet conversation mixed with the rustle of magazines, the gentle hum of hair dryers warming up. First clients in 15 minutes, I announced, straightening my work apron. Either help set up or head out. Mom stood uncertainly, then reached for a broom. Marla smiled, continuing to organize magazines. I looked at my reflection one last time. Not a victim, not a revenge seeker, just a woman building something new from the ashes of what was lost. Ruth was right. The best revenge wasn't exposing Sadie's schemes or watching my family's perfect facade crumble. It wasn't even succeeding despite their doubts. The best revenge was discovering I never needed revenge at all. I just needed to find my own path. The bell chimed again, my first client of the day. I picked up my scissors, feeling their familiar weight. In the mirror, I caught a glimpse of something in Mom's expression, pride maybe or regret. Perhaps both. But I wasn't doing this for her, or for Sadie, or even for Ruth anymore. I was doing it for that little girl in the photograph, playing with her father's styling tools, dreaming of creating something beautiful. Welcome to Ruth's Grace, I said to my client, my voice strong and sure. What are we creating today? Behind me, the past lingered in shadows, Sadie's schemes, Mom's neglect, all the pain and betrayal. But ahead lay something brighter. A future built not on revenge or resentment, but on the simple joy of following my own dreams. Sometimes that's the greatest victory of all.
I never thought my life would change because of a vintage Hermes scarf, but that's exactly what happened last spring at Second Chance's thrift store. My name is Felicity, and I probably spend way too much time hunting for hidden fashion treasures between racks of other people's cast-offs. But this particular Thursday was different. I had just spotted the distinctive orange box peeking out from under a pile of scarves when another hand reached for it at the same time. "Oh, sorry." A deep voice chuckled. "Ladies first." I looked up to find myself staring into the warmest brown eyes I'd ever seen. The guy was tall, with slightly messy dark hair and a camera slung around his neck. He had that artsy vibe that always made my heart skip a beat. "No, please, go ahead," I said, trying to sound casual while my pulse did a little dance. I was just being nosy anyway. Actually, I could use a second opinion. He picked up the box and carefully opened it. Inside was a pristine silk scarf in swirling shades of blue and gold. "I'm doing a vintage-inspired photo shoot tomorrow, but I know nothing about fashion. Is this something special?" "That's a genuine Hermes scarf from the 1960s, I said, unable to hide my excitement. "See the hand-rolled edges and the artist's signature? It's probably worth at least $500. His eyebrows shot up. "And it's priced at $15? How do you know all this?" "I'm a bit of a fashion nerd. I can spot designer pieces from across the room." I smiled. "I'm Felicity." "Nolan Brooks," he said, extending his hand. "Fashion nerd meets photography nerd. Would you maybe want to grab a coffee and tell me more about vintage fashion? I could really use your expertise for this shoot." That's how it started. Coffee turned into dinner, dinner turned into dating, and 3 months later I was head over heels in love with Nolan. Everything was perfect until I met his sister Celeste. The first time was at their parents' house for Sunday dinner. I'd spent hours choosing the perfect outfit, a vintage Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress I'd scored for $30. Nolan's parents, Evelyn and Gerald, were warm and welcoming, but Celeste's smile never quite reached her eyes. "Oh, how creative of you to wear secondhand clothes," she said, sipping her wine. "I could never." "Who knows where they've been?" "Celeste," Evelyn warned, but her daughter just shrugged. "I'm just saying, if you're going to be part of the Brooks family, you might want to consider upgrading your wardrobe. We have certain standards to maintain." I felt my cheeks burn as Nolan squeezed my hand under the table. Actually, Felicity has an amazing eye for fashion. She's helping style my upcoming magazine shoot. Really? Celeste's perfectly manicured eyebrows arched. How interesting. I just got engaged to Marcus Hale, of Hale Industries. We're planning the wedding of the season. Something in her tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was Nolan's sister, after all. I needed to make this work. Later that night, as Nolan drove me home, I caught him glancing at me worriedly. I'm sorry about Celeste. She can be intense sometimes. It's fine, I said, even though it wasn't. She's probably just protective of her family. What I didn't say was how I'd seen Celeste watching me throughout dinner, studying every move I made, every word I spoke. I didn't mention how she'd cornered me in the kitchen and grilled me about my background, my job, my plans for the future. And I definitely didn't tell Nolan about the way she'd smiled when I mentioned wanting a small, intimate wedding someday, a smile that made me feel like I'd just handed her ammunition. I had no idea then that this was just the beginning, that Celeste Brooks was about to turn my life into her own personal chess game. But looking back now, I should have seen it coming. After all, the best vintage pieces always come with a history, and some of them hide dark secrets beneath their beautiful surfaces. The next few weeks were a blur of family dinners and forced smiles. I kept telling myself things would get better with Celeste, but each interaction left me feeling more like an outsider. Tonight was supposed to be different, a casual barbecue at the Brooks house to celebrate Nolan's latest magazine cover. I arrived early to help Evelyn in the kitchen, wearing a vintage Chanel blazer I'd restored myself. As I chopped vegetables, she touched the fabric admiringly. You have such a gift, Felicity. The way you bring these pieces back to life. She paused, glancing toward the door. I hope you know that, Gerald, and I think you're wonderful for Nolan. Before I could respond, Celeste swept in wearing what looked like this season's entire Gucci collection. Mother, Marcus is bringing his parents tonight. Did you remember to get the expensive wine I asked for? I thought this was just a family dinner, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Celeste's laugh was like ice crackling. Oh, didn't Nolan tell you? I turned it into an engagement celebration. Marcus's father is thinking of featuring Nolan's photography in their company's new campaign. She touched my blazer. Is this secondhand? How brave of you. I felt my jaw tighten, but before I could respond, Nolan appeared, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Hey, beautiful. That blazer looks amazing on you. It should, Celeste said. The real thing costs about $12,000. She turned to her mother. We need to set up the formal dining room instead of eating outside. The Hales aren't exactly barbecue people. I watched Evelyn's face fall. She'd spent all day preparing Nolan's favorite grilled dishes. But Nolan wanted. Nolan understands how important this is for the family, don't you? Celeste's tone was sweet, but her eyes were sharp as she looked at her brother. Maybe we could do both, he suggested, already backing down. Set up inside but keep some food on the grill? I felt my heart sink as Evelyn quietly began moving dishes inside. This was supposed to be Nolan's celebration, but somehow Celeste had hijacked it, just like she seemed to be doing with everything else in our lives. During dinner, I found myself seated between Marcus's mother, who kept asking if my blazer was some kind of costume, and Celeste, who took every opportunity to mention the exclusive designer boutiques she was considering for her wedding dress. Of course, Felicity probably has some creative ideas for her own wedding, Celeste said suddenly, turning to me. What were you thinking? Something vintage, I assume? Table went quiet. Nolan and I hadn't even discussed marriage yet. I felt my face heat up as everyone waited for my response. I haven't really. Oh, that's right, Celeste interrupted. You haven't set a date yet, or even gotten engaged. She patted my hand. Don't worry, when it happens, I'll help you plan everything. After all, I'll have plenty of experience after my wedding. Gerald cleared his throat. Celeste, perhaps we could focus on celebrating Nolan's achievement tonight? Of course, Daddy. Celeste raised her glass. To Nolan's success and to family. Later, as guests were leaving, I overheard Celeste talking to Marcus in the hallway. Poor thing, she tries so hard to fit in. But you can't buy class, can you? I mean, showing up in secondhand clothes to meet your parents? She seemed nice enough, Marcus replied. And that blazer was actually quite elegant. Oh, honey, you're too kind. But trust me, she's not Brooke's material. Nolan will figure that out eventually. I slipped away before they could see me, my hands shaking as I gathered my things. In the kitchen, I found Gerald washing dishes alone. Don't let her get to you, he said quietly, not looking up. Some people mistake cruelty for sophistication. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. As I waited for Nolan to drive me home, I caught my reflection in the window, the proud vintage blazer suddenly feeling like a costume. For the first time, I wondered if loving Nolan was worth the price of admission to his world. What I didn't know then was that Celeste was just getting started. And her next move would force me to choose between keeping the peace and keeping my self-respect. The moment everything changed happened at the Brooks family lake house. Nolan had just proposed the night before, a perfect sunset moment that felt like a dream. I should have known better than to think Celeste would let me have even 24 hours of pure happiness. I was helping Evelyn prepare lunch when I realized I'd left my engagement ring upstairs after washing my hands. As I approached Nolan's old bedroom, I heard Celeste's voice floating through the cracked door. It's actually perfect timing, she was saying. Now I can use all of Felicity's wedding ideas for my own. She'll never suspect I've been collecting them for months. I froze, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Are you sure that's necessary? It was Marcus's voice, sounding uncertain. Your brother just got engaged. Oh, please, their wedding will be some quirky vintage affair. I'm doing everyone a favor by elevating her ideas into something actually sophisticated. Besides, Nolan's been telling me everything, her dress design, the venue she wants, even the antique lace she found for the veil. My stomach lurched. I'd shared those details with Nolan in private moments, dreaming together about our future. He'd promised they were our secrets. Speaking of which, Celeste continued, I already called her dream venue and booked it for the weekend before their date. The deposit cleared this morning. Won't that seem obvious? Marcus asked. That's the beauty of it. She'll look crazy if she accuses me of copying her. After all, I'm the one getting married first now. Everyone will think she's the one copying me. I must have made a sound because the conversation stopped abruptly. I hurried back downstairs, my hands shaking so badly I had to grip the railing. In the kitchen, Nolan was helping his mother with the salad. He smiled when he saw me, but it faded when he noticed my expression. Hey, what's wrong? Can we talk? My voice sounded strange, even to me. Privately. Side on the deck, the lake sparkled mockingly in the summer sun. I turned to face him, fighting to keep my voice steady. Have you been telling Celeste about our wedding plans? Well, yeah, she's been really interested lately. She said she wants to help. He looked confused. Isn't that a good thing? She's planning to steal everything, Nolan. I just heard her talking to Marcus. She's already booked our venue for her wedding, the one I showed you in secret. His face went through a series of emotions, surprise, doubt, defense. Come on, that's got to be a misunderstanding. Celeste wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Deliberately try to hurt me? That's all she's done since we met. The words burst out before I could stop them. You're overreacting, he said, using that placating tone that suddenly made me want to scream. She's my sister, Felicity. She's just excited about weddings right now. Just then, Celeste appeared in the doorway, wearing a concerned expression that made my skin crawl. Is everything okay out here? I thought I heard raised voices. Did you book the Riverside Manor for your wedding? I asked directly. Oh, that. She smiled brightly. Yes, isn't it perfect? I remembered how much you loved it when you mentioned it at dinner last month. I hope you don't mind. Great minds think alike, right? I looked at Nolan, waiting for him to say something to defend me. He shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we could all just. Just what? I interrupted, slipping off my engagement ring. Just pretend this isn't happening? Just let her steal every piece of our wedding like she's been planning for months? Felicity, don't be dramatic, Celeste said, her voice dripping with fake concern. If you're not ready to plan a wedding, just say so. I placed the ring on the deck railing, my vision blurring with tears of rage. You're right. I'm not ready. Not for this family, not for a husband who won't stand up for me. And definitely not for a sister-in-law who treats my life like it's her personal shopping catalog. As I walked away, I heard Nolan call my name, but it was Celeste's voice that followed me. See? I told you she wasn't Brooke's material. I got in my car and drove, not knowing then that this wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of my awakening. 3 days after leaving the lake house, I found myself sorting through vintage dresses at work when Gerald Brooks walked into my shop. He looked out of place among the racks of second-hand clothes, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the worn wooden floors. Interesting place you have here, he said, running his finger along a 1950s Dior dress. Evelyn mentioned you restore these? I nodded, unable to find my voice. Was he here to convince me to come back? To defend Celeste? Nolan's been miserable, he continued, but his tone wasn't accusatory. Though I suspect that's not entirely about losing you. What do you mean? The Hales pulled their advertising campaign. Apparently, Marcus had some concerns about working with our family. He picked up a vintage brooch from the display case. Celeste is blaming you, of course. My hands stilled on the dress I was mending. I haven't spoken to Marcus. No, but he's not blind. Or stupid. Gerald set the brooch down carefully. He came by the house yesterday, asking questions about Celeste's sudden interest in vintage weddings and unique venues. Before I could respond, the shop door chimed. Nolan walked in, stopping short when he saw his father. Dad? What are you doing here? Just leaving, actually. Gerald squeezed my shoulder as he passed. Remember what I said about authenticity, Felicity. Some things can't be copied no matter how hard people try. After he left, Nolan and I stood in uncomfortable silence. He looked tired, his usually perfect hair messy like he'd been running his hands through it. You left your ring, he said finally. You left me to face your sister alone. He winced. I talked to her. She agreed to change her wedding venue. That's not the point, Nolan. I picked up a damaged silk scarf, focusing on the torn edges rather than his face. She's been systematically trying to destroy anything good in my life, and you've been helping her do it. She's my sister, and I was supposed to be your wife. My voice cracked on the last word. But you couldn't even tell her to back off when she was literally stealing our wedding plans. I didn't think, he stopped, frustrated. Look, I brought something to show you. He pulled out his phone, showing me a series of texts from Celeste. My stomach turned as I read them, detailed questions about my wedding ideas, our private conversations, even photos she'd asked him to take of my design sketches. See? She was just excited about wedding planning. She wanted to help. I stared at him, realizing with sudden clarity that he truly couldn't see what was right in front of him. Or worse, he didn't want to. Your father said Marcus pulled the advertising campaign, I said quietly. Did you ever wonder why? Nolan's face clouded. Celeste said you must have said something to him. Of course she did. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. And you believed her just like you always do. The shop door chimed again. This time it was Marcus himself, looking uncomfortable but determined. Sorry to interrupt, he said. Felicity, could we talk? About Celeste. Nolan stepped between us. Whatever she told you about my sister. She hasn't told me anything, Marcus cut in. That's why I'm here. I need to know if I'm making a mistake trusting Celeste. The irony of the moment wasn't lost on me, Celeste's fiancé coming to me for the truth while her own brother stood there defending her lies. I looked at Nolan, giving him one last chance. Do you want to tell him about the texts? About how your sister has been planning to steal my wedding piece by piece? Nolan's silence was deafening. I think you should go, I told him, turning away to hide my tears. Both of you. Whatever Celeste is or isn't doing, it's not my problem anymore. As they left, I heard Marcus ask Nolan, Did you really not see what she was doing to Felicity? I didn't hear Nolan's response, but I didn't need to. His silence had already told me everything I needed to know about where his loyalties lay. What I didn't realize then was that Marcus's visit would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything, not just for me and Nolan, but for the entire Brooks family. A week after Marcus's visit to my shop, I received an invitation to Celeste's wedding. Not just any invitation, an exact replica of the custom design I'd sketched in my private journal, the one I'd only ever shown to Nolan. My hands shook as I read the date, exactly 2 weeks before what would have been my wedding day. I was still staring at it when Evelyn called. I know this is awkward, she said, her voice strained. But Celeste insists you come. She says it would mean so much to her. I bet it would. I traced the delicate pattern I'd spent months designing. Did she tell you where she got the invitation design? A long pause. Felicity, please. She's trying to make amends. By stealing my wedding? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Actually, Evelyn hesitated, that's part of why I'm calling. Celeste wants you to help with her dress. She says your vintage expertise would be perfect for the alteration she needs. I almost laughed. What dress? The one she found at that little boutique in Paris. The 1950s Dior you mentioned loving? My stomach dropped. I told Nolan about that dress during a late-night conversation, describing my dream of recreating it for our wedding. Now Celeste had somehow tracked down the original. Can't, I said firmly. Please, Evelyn's voice cracked. Things are so tense in the family. Gerald barely speaks to Nolan, Marcus is asking questions about everything, and Celeste, she's not herself. Maybe if you helped, showed her some kindness. Kindness? I interrupted. Like the kindness she showed me when she systematically stole every detail of my wedding? Or the kindness Nolan showed by helping her do it? The shop door chimed. Celeste walked in, wearing a triumphant smile and carrying a garment bag. I'll call you back, I told Evelyn, hanging up before she could respond. Surprise! Celeste sang out, laying the bag across my counter. I need your magic touch with this. It's a bit delicate and you're the only one I trust. She unzipped the bag, revealing the exact dress I'd dreamed of wearing. The ivory silk was just as beautiful as I'd imagined. How did you find it? I asked, my voice hollow. Oh, Nolan mentioned how much you loved it. I had my connections track it down. She smiled sweetly. Consider this my olive branch. You help me with the alterations, and maybe we can put all this unpleasantness behind us. I stared at her, finally seeing clearly what I should have seen months ago. This wasn't about the wedding at all. This was about power, about breaking me piece by piece. No, I said quietly. Excuse me. I said no. I zipped the garment bag closed. Take your dress and get out of my shop. Her smile vanished. You're being ridiculous. This is my wedding we're talking about. No, this was supposed to be my wedding. My dress. My designs. My dreams. I moved around the counter, anger giving me strength. But you couldn't stand that, could you? You had to take everything just to prove you could. You don't deserve any of it, she hissed, mask finally slipping. You're nothing but a second-hand shop girl who got lucky with my brother. I'm doing him a favor by showing him who you really are. And who are you, Celeste? Besides a thief of other people's dreams? She grabbed the garment bag. You'll regret this. When I'm done, you won't have anything left. Not your designs, not your reputation, and definitely not my brother. As she stormed out, I noticed Marcus standing just outside the shop window, his face dark with anger. He'd heard everything. I should have felt satisfied, knowing Celeste had finally shown her true colors to her fiancé. Instead, I felt empty, because I knew what came next would be worse than anything she'd done so far. Celeste Brooks didn't just want my wedding anymore. She wanted to destroy me completely, and I was running out of ways to stop her. I shouldn't have gone to Celeste's wedding, but something pulled me there, maybe the same instinct that makes people slow down to watch car crashes. I slipped into the church just as the ceremony was starting, staying in the back where shadows could hide me. Everything was mine. The vintage lace draped along the pews, the hand-pressed flower arrangements, even the specific shade of ivory I'd spent months tracking down. But seeing Celeste in my dream dress, that was the final twist of the knife. Beautiful ceremony, isn't it? I jumped. Gerald Brooks stood beside me, his expression unreadable. She stole everything, I whispered. Every single detail. I know. He handed me his phone. On the screen was my original wedding planning journal photographs of every page. Nolan sent these to her months ago. I found them when I was checking the family cloud storage. My stomach lurched. He gave her everything? He thought he was helping. Gerald's voice was tired. He still doesn't see what she's really doing. The wedding march began to play, the exact vintage recording I discovered in an old record shop. I watched Celeste float down the aisle, wearing my dress, my smile, my dreams. Marcus stood at the altar, his face tight with tension. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw something like apology there. Then Celeste reached him, and the ceremony began. I should have left then, but I stayed, watching as the priest asked if anyone had any objections. The silence felt like a physical weight. Then Marcus cleared his throat. I do, he said quietly. I object. Church erupted in whispers. Celeste's face went white. Marcus. Her voice wavered. What are you doing? I can't marry someone who builds their happiness on other people's pain. He turned to face the shocked guests. Everything about this wedding was stolen. The dress, the decorations, even the music. It was all copied from Felicity's plans. Plans that Celeste took without permission. That's ridiculous. Celeste's voice rose shrilly. Nolan, tell them. Nolan stood from his place in the front row, looking confused. I just shared some ideas with you. You said you wanted to help. Help? Marcus laughed bitterly. Is that what you call systematically destroying your brother's relationship? Stealing every detail of his wedding? It's not stealing if he gave them to me. Celeste shouted, mask finally cracking. Besides, I did her a favor. Someone like her doesn't deserve a Brooks family wedding. She's nothing but a second-hand shop girl who has more class and creativity in her little finger than you'll ever have, Gerald interrupted, his voice carrying through the church. And who just watched you reveal your true self to everyone who matters. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked around at the shocked faces of the guests, at Marcus's quiet dignity, at Nolan's dawning horror. But it was Celeste's expression that stopped me, cold, pure, undiluted hatred directed straight at me. You, she snarled. You planned this. You turned them all against me. She lunged forward, but instead of coming for me, she grabbed the vintage lace runner from the nearest pew and yanked. Carefully arranged flowers crashed to the floor. In seconds, she was tearing through the decorations like a tornado, destroying everything she'd stolen from me. Celeste, stop. Nolan tried to grab her arm, but she shoved him away. This is all your fault, she screamed at me. You took everything from me, my brother, my fiancé, my family's respect. I'll make sure you never have anything of your own. As security finally pulled her away, I caught Nolan's eye. The guilt and shame on his face should have felt like victory. Instead, I just felt empty. I slipped out during the chaos, but not before I heard Celeste's final threat. "This isn't over, Felicity! I'll make you pay for this." Walking home in the fading light, I realized she was right about one thing. It wasn't over. Because now I had to decide. Was protecting myself worth destroying what remained of the Brooks family? And more importantly, could I live with either choice? The answer would change everything, I just didn't know how much yet. The morning after the failed wedding, I found Celeste waiting outside my shop. She wasn't wearing designer clothes anymore, just jeans and a sweater that made her look almost normal. Almost human. "We need to talk," she said quietly. I unlocked the door, letting her follow me inside. The shop felt different somehow, like a stage set for whatever was about to happen. "I lost everything yesterday," Celeste said, running her finger along a vintage dress rack. "Marcus won't return my calls. Mother can barely look at me. Even Nolan." Her voice cracked. "I didn't make you do any of it," I said, keeping the counter between us. "You chose to steal my wedding plans. You chose to lie. Because you took my brother from me." She whirled around, mask cracking. "He was all I had, and you just walked in with your perfect vintage finds and your creative talent and your authenticity." She spat the word like poison. "Nolan made his own choices." "Did he?" She pulled out her phone. "Because he's outside right now, ready to choose again." My heart stopped as Nolan walked in, looking trapped between us. "Tell her," Celeste demanded. "Tell her what you decided." Nolan wouldn't meet my eyes. "The family needs to heal, Felicity. We need to put this behind us. Maybe if you apologize to Celeste." Apologized? The word felt like glass in my mouth. For turning Marcus against her. For humiliating her at the wedding. I stared at him, finally seeing the truth. "You still don't get it, do you? She didn't just steal my wedding plans, Nolan. She tried to steal my entire life, and you helped her do it. I never meant." "No, you never meant anything." "That's the problem." I turned to Celeste. "You want an apology? Fine. I'm sorry I ever thought I could be part of this family. I'm sorry I wasted months loving someone who couldn't even see what was right in front of him." "That's not good enough," Celeste said. "You destroyed my life. Now I'll destroy your business. I've already called every supplier in the city, told them about how you sell knockoffs as authentic vintage." "Actually," a new voice interrupted, "you won't be doing that." Marcus stood in the doorway, holding a folder. "I recorded everything, Celeste. Every threat, every lie, every attempt to destroy Felicity's reputation. I think the police would be very interested in this pattern of harassment." Celeste's face went white. "You wouldn't. Try me." His voice was steel. "The only reason I haven't turned this over already is because of Felicity. She asked me to wait to give you a chance to walk away." "Is that true?" Nolan asked me. I nodded. "I didn't want to destroy your family, Nolan. I just wanted to protect myself." "Felicity." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "No. We're done. All of us." I looked at Celeste. "Take your brother and go. Build whatever story you need to explain your failed wedding. I don't care anymore." "You're making a mistake," she said, but her voice trembled. "The only mistake was thinking I needed any of this." I opened the door. "Goodbye, Celeste." "Goodbye, Nolan." They left silently, Nolan casting one last desperate look over his shoulder. Marcus stayed behind. "You could have destroyed them," he said quietly. "Why didn't you?" I touched a vintage silk scarf, the one that had started everything. "Because I don't want to be like her. Some things are worth more than revenge." "What will you do now?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. "What I've always done. Find beautiful things that others threw away and give them new life. Just, maybe not for the Brooks family anymore." As Marcus left, I turned the shop sign to open. Inside, life went on. Inside, surrounded by the vintage pieces I'd lovingly restored, I finally understood. Sometimes the most valuable things we find aren't the ones we're looking for, but the parts of ourselves we discover along the way. And no one could steal that from me, not even Celeste Brooks. 6 months after Celeste's failed wedding, I stood in my new studio space, surrounded by the soft whisper of vintage silk and leather. The morning light filtered through tall windows, catching on the brass fixtures I'd salvaged from an old department store. Everything here had a story just like me. The bell chimed as Evelyn Brooks walked in, looking elegant but uncertain. "This is beautiful, Felicity," she said, touching a restored Chanel jacket. "Gerald said you'd done something special with the place, but this—" "Thank you." I adjusted a display, giving my hands something to do. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Gerald insisted. He wants to talk about investing in your business." She paused, watching me carefully. "Celeste left for Paris last week." I nodded, unsurprised. "And Nolan? Taking assignments overseas. I think he finally understands what he lost." She moved closer, her voice softening. "We all do." Before I could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway. Since the wedding, he'd become an unexpected ally, helping me source rare vintage pieces through his business connections. "Ready for the meeting?" he asked, then noticed Evelyn. "Mrs. Brooks, perfect timing. Did you tell her about the investment offer?" "I was just getting to that." Evelyn pulled out an envelope. "Gerald and I want to help you expand. Your talent for restoration, your eye for beauty, it shouldn't be limited to one shop." Inside the envelope was a business proposal, funding for a chain of high-end vintage restoration boutiques, with me as creative director. The kind of opportunity I'd once dreamed about sharing with Nolan. "I don't know," I said slowly. "The Brooks family and I don't have the best history with partnerships." "That's exactly why it needs to be you," Gerald said, appearing behind his wife. "Someone who chose integrity over acceptance. Who showed our family what we'd become." "And what about Celeste?" "Nolan. They'll learn to live with it," Gerald said firmly. "Just like they're learning to live with their choices." Marcus touched my arm gently. "You don't have to decide now. But don't let what happened stop you from building something amazing." I looked around my studio, at the pieces I'd rescued and restored, at the sketches for designs that were entirely my own. Then I noticed something, a familiar orange box sitting on my counter. "What's this?" "Found it at an estate sale," Marcus said, smiling. "Thought you might want it back." Inside was the Hermes scarf from that first day with Nolan. But instead of feeling pain, I felt something else, closure. "Okay," I said, looking at Gerald and Evelyn. "But I have conditions. This is my vision, my designs. No compromises." "We wouldn't want it any other way," Gerald replied. Later, after they'd left, I stood in my studio's doorway, watching the sunset paint the city gold. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry. For everything. N." I didn't respond. Some vintage pieces are better left in their boxes, preserved as memories of who we used to be. Instead, I walked to my workbench where a damaged 1940s evening gown waited for restoration. Its beading was scattered, its seams frayed, but I could see its potential. Just like I'd finally seen my own. The bell chimed again. A young woman walked in, wearing uncertainty like I once had. "I found this at a thrift store," she said, holding up a worn designer bag. "Everyone says it's not worth fixing, but you see something in it," I finished, recognizing that familiar hope. "Let me show you what it could become." As I led her to my workbench, I realized something. Sometimes the most valuable things we restore aren't the vintage pieces we find, but the parts of ourselves we thought were broken beyond repair. And sometimes, just sometimes, letting go of a dream makes room for something even better to take its place. I picked up my tools and began to work, ready to write my own story, one stitch at a time.